Welcome viewers. Today we'll be discussing about bureaucracy. We will understand what is Bennis' argument for demise of bureaucracy and summarize Mywell's counter argument that bureaucracy is in good health, explain why bureaucracies are very popular and more in practice. So bureaucracy, let us understand why it is called a structural dinosaur. Bureaucracies had its time, but gone are those days when bureaucracy was in place, and if bureaucracy is not already dead, it is gasping its last breath. So there is some arguments and counter arguments in favor and against of bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is alive and it is well. So it is not the most efficient way to organize activities. These positions reflect two perspectives on bureaucracy. Some people are in favor and some streams of researchers are against bureaucracy. Which is correct? So, this lecture will discuss or will throw light on which is the correct argument. Let us first talk about the arguments about the death of bureaucracy. One of the best known arguments presented against the machine bureaucracy was made by social psychologist Warren Bennis, and it represented a succinct analysis of the anti bureaucratic attack. And the following summarizes Bennis' arguments that bureaucracy has become obsolete. Every age develops an organizational form appropriate as per the needs, and accordingly, bureaucracy is now out of step with contemporary realities. Bureaucratic model was developed as a reaction against one of the personal subjugation, nepotism, cruelty, and two capricious and subjective judgments that passed for acceptable managerial practices. Bureaucracy has emerged or emanated out of the need for organizations for more order, precision, standardization, and demand for impartial treatment to the employees. However, at least four factors are direct threats to bureaucracy today. The first one is rapid and unexpected growth of change. Bureaucracy's strength is its capacity to manage organizations efficiently, manage efficiency, routine, and predictable activities that take place in a stable and predictable environment. But however, we see with the progression of time, because of competition, because of several factors in the environment, like change in technology, change in the governments, change in various factors, they change, customers' preferences have changed. So, there are the different stakeholder groups which have created a pressure on the business organizations. So, the environment is not very stable and complacent. Bureaucracy, with its nicely defined chain of command or the rules and rigidity, is poorly adapted to the rapid change of rapid changing business environment which is in place today. The second factor is the growth in size. While in theory there may be no natural limits to the height of bureaucratic pyramid, in practice the elements of complexity is almost invariably introduced when there is considerable increase in size, increased administrative overhead, tighter controls, greater impersonality, outmoded rules are all examples of what happened in bureaucracies as size increases, acts to hinder the organizational growth. The third factor is increasing diversity. Today, we have seen that activities require persons with diversity. Every act, task requires diverse expertise, competence, the specialized knowledge of people. So, there is lot of diversity in organizations, or diversity leads to innovation. So, therefore, this is also one of the factors contributing to the death of bureaucracy. Hurried growth, rapid change, and increased specializations are incompatible with bureaucratic setup. Bureaucracy is well defined chain of command or hierarchy, rigid rules and procedures, and impersonality. The fourth factor is change in managerial behavior. Managers are undergoing a subtle but perceptible change in philosophy. So, these changes are undermining the ideology that is surrounded and supported with bureaucracies. Specifically, managers have a new concept of human beings based on increased knowledge of their complex and shifting needs, and replaces oversimplified, innocent, push button ideas of men and women. Now, people do not want to be just being controlled, There is lot of independence, like people with expertise, knowledge, enhanced cognition want independence. They want to bring forth their ideas. So bureaucracy is just keeping them in a cage. So a new concept of power based on collaboration and reasons, rational, which replaces a model of power based on coercion, exercising policies of threat, or maybe coercion and pressure on individuals, is not accepted. So, and a new concept of organizational values based on humanistic democratic ideas, where you give respect to the individuals working in the organization, humanistic values, and replaces the depersonalized mechanistic value system of democracy. So, what is the not liked is coercion or driving people to work, power and or the carrot and stick approach. In summary, Bennis saw the bureaucratic structure is too mechanical for the need of modern organizations. The bureaucratic structure has become obsolete because it is designed to deal with stable environment, whereas the contemporary need is for a structure that is responsive to the changing business environment, which will effectively respond to the changes in the business environment. Now, we look at the greatly exaggerated death of bureaucracy, or we talk about how bureaucracy is losing its essence. Robert Mywald has offered a counter argument to Bennis. His major contention is that bureaucracy can adapt to changing and dynamic environment. So let us understand what he summarizes. What is Mywald's response or summarization of the bureaucracy? Warren Bennis has caught the fancy of many by describing the conditions that he argues his arguments are bringing about the death of bureaucracy, whereas certainly there can be no doubt about the organization is changing, but these changes are not leaving bureaucracy behind. In fact, the force of bureaucracy has never been stronger. Our perspective of bureaucracy has been influenced strongly by the characteristics defined by Max Weber. Genius though he was, Weber was not a soothsayer, but he could not have foreseen all the many forms the essence of bureaucracy could take. His formulation of the concept of bureaucracy provided an invaluable tool for analysis of organizational problems in society that were making the adjustments to industrialization. However, rather than making the superficial assumption that post industrialization means post bureaucratic, it might be wiser to inquire whether bureaucracies can adjust to the so called new age. Is bureaucracy restricted to be mechanical? In many situations, many cases, it would appear that external bureaucratic control have simply been replaced with more subtle influences on the individual. The end result in either case is the same, a high degree of predictability about human behavior in large, complex organizations. Weber has never impaired that his ideal type was universal, external form. His intention rather was to make the affairs of people more amenable to rational calculation. Given the technology of the 19th century and his familiarity with the authoritarian tendencies of the Germans, it is little wonder that Weber described bureaucracy as he visualized. He would hardly be surprised, however, to learn that more sophisticated means of controlling behavior have been invented. All he wanted was a scientifically derived concept of efficiency, and certainly would not be aghast to find that his model has been modified to think of new ways to improve efficiency. During the peak of his influence, machine bureaucracy was the most efficient means of applying rationality to organizational life. Of all the social structures, it has promised maximization of scientifically correct decision making. In the so called post bureaucratic situations of today, really different from the conditions implied in Weber's model, it does not differ at all in any significant sense, and one might go on to argue in the most critical areas The post bureaucratic system is nothing more than Max Weber's model and all the more sophisticated modifications. Despite the contortions through which organizations, or despite all this, the organization's theorists have put themselves in the 20th century, the remarkable fact remains that there has been a substantial change in the basic premise. The guiding belief still is that regularities exist, one level or the another may be learned and acted upon. Bureaucracy is not dead. If Weber were here today, he would conclude that bureaucracy is still very much alive and it is well practiced. Specific elements of his model are poorly adjusted in our times and must be modified. It keeps on modifying, but that is reasonable concession to the fact that conditions do change. In one thing to say that bureaucracy can be eliminated or must be eliminated, and another to admit that it has changed with the times. How it has changed. Now, the question is, most obviously, it has to develop an alternative to deal with organizations when authority is based on knowledge. The professional bureaucracy is a clear example of such modification. Rational discipline, rather than imposed externally, is internalized through professionalization of employees. Authorities from above is replaced by self regimentation. This, of course, does not result in the end of bureaucracy. One can give an argument that professional bureaucracy has merely substituted the arrogance in the training for high offices. In summary, Mayweld has argued that Weber have never meant bureaucratic characteristics to endure the eternity. Weber's major objective was to create a rational and efficient form uh, of bureaucracy. Whatever form is required to maintain rationality and efficiency results in bureaucracy. Development of professional bureaucracy is a perfect example of bureaucratic characteristics being modified to represent the most rational and efficient way in which to structure the knowledge dominated organizations. Now, how to go about slimming down bureaucracies? New corporate bureaucracies is learned and more efficient than is evaluated in the 1970s or 80s. This probably most evident in similar corporate headquarters staffs. Bureaucracies in multiple business corporations have the tendency to expand in size with multiple staff at headquarters. It has now been unusual for some of the Fortune 500 firms to employ a large number of employees, probably more than 10,000 or more people at the head office. AT&T, for example, has 30,000 people in the early 1980s in corporate offices, such as planners, as economists, as marketing professionals, central purchasing agents, and real estate managers. They are our human resource specialists. They have since eliminated 12,000 of these positions. So, the current trend is to decentralize various activities rather than having a large group of people in the operating units to reduce the role of headquarters or reduce the control of headquarters and buy services outside whenever possible rather than employing full time staff to provide them. The result of a corporate headquarters staff who acts like a small merchant bank or holding company investing capital among various enterprises or monitoring the profitability of each against projections, replacing underachieving top managers and constantly looking for new investment opportunities. The companies are setting high standards to keep their headquarters staff lean. So the focus is on having a lean structure. If an organization has a large number of people, they are reducing the staff strength in the headquarters. But you cannot ignore the obvious bureaucracies are everywhere. Despite the criticism, the vast majority of organizations are predominantly bureaucratic in structure, and of all, a few bureaucracies represent the most efficient way for them to organize. So, this conclusion runs counter to what we should prevail if we so claim. We now live in times where the change is constant and dynamic. Standardized technologies have replaced the customized processes, humanistic practices are in place, and the goal of reducing employees' alienation demands elimination of rigidities of bureaucracy. So, why is it then that bureaucratic form is thriving? There appears to be no simple answer to this question. We can propose a number of possible explanations. The first explanation for this of why we still have bureaucracies is that forgetting the contingency factors that would predict non-bureaucratic structures of a moment, it is obvious that bureaucracy works regardless of technology, regardless of the business environment, and so on. Bureaucracies are effective in organizing activities like manufacturing, services, hospitals, schools, and colleges, the military, and various non-profit organizations or voluntary associations. The second factor is the large size still prevails. Organizations that succeed and survive tend to grow in form to larger size, and we know bureaucracy is efficient with large size. Smaller organizations and their non bureaucratic structures are more likely to fail. So, what we conclude is bureaucracy still exists. So, over time, small organizations may come and go, but large bureaucracies stay. So, it may be that the size is the dominant criteria determining the structure, and therefore, the increasing size may cause bureaucracy. The third important factor is natural selection favors bureaucracy. Natural selection thesis, or the proposition which was the basis of population ecology model discussed several times, can also be used to explain the rise and proliferation of bureaucracies. There are potentially many types of organizations in our society, but although they differ, they also retain certain design elements because these elements are inherently more efficient and are able to compete more effectively. So, bureaucracies will eventually dominate in our society because of this design, in contrast to all other trends to be most efficient, and it drives out organizations that use any other form. The fourth factor is the societal values are changing. A counterpoint to the Bennis proposition that management philosophy is shifting to greater humanism is that our values still favor order and regimentation. We have traditionally been goal oriented or purpose oriented and are comfortable with authoritarian structure. We want to be shown a path or to be driven towards the goal. As we see in a society, parents are controlling the kids in the home or the children in the home. Similarly, in the schools, the order is maintained as we are part of the system. There are rules, regulations which reinforce our behavior. Order, regularity are being part of the system. Employees in any organization look with disfavor on jobs that are ambiguous. We generally like to have to be in a place where there is clarity, where there are clear instructions. If there is ambiguity in the task, it will end up in confusion, and where jobs responsibilities are not very clear or vague. While the younger generation believes strongly in individual freedom, of course, autonomy is important. It is generally acknowledged that freedom requires obedience to set of rules and regulations. Your freedom may lead to confusion. So, bureaucracy is consistent with the values of order and regimentation. The fifth factor is environmental turbulence is exaggerated. As discussed in the previous sections, environment may not be as dynamic as assumed to be. The media projects that the times are changing. A more correct observation might be the change is not that dynamic now than any other times in the history, and the impact of uncertainties in the environment on the organization are substantially reduced as a result of managerial strategies. The sixth factor is the professional bureaucracy has emerged. What is professional bureaucracy? The professional bureaucracy provides the same degree of standardization and control as does Weber's machine bureaucracy. So, the increased need for technical expertise in organizations and the rapid expansion of knowledge intensive industries has been handled neatly by the professional bureaucracies. The bureaucratic form has demonstrated the ability to adjust towards the greatest threat the knowledge revolution by modifying itself. The goal of standardization has been proven to be achievable by more than one path. The seventh factor is that bureaucracy maintains control. High standardization, preferably with centralized power in the hands of dominant coalition, is desirable by those in control. Bureaucracy obviously meets that end from the power control perspective. Therefore, we would predict bureaucracy to be preferred structure because it's a most effective mechanism structurally for managing control of large organization. So, consistent with the conclusion, we have observed that a moderate degree of routineness pervades all organizations. Since technology is chosen, it is a logical interpretation to conclude that those in power would select technologies and a matching structural form that would maintain and enhance their control. Those elements lead us to the inevitability of bureaucracy. Now, let us look at how to go about using bureaucracy to benefit organizations. If organizational hierarchies are to function efficiently and the problems of overly bureaucratic organizations are to be avoided, both managers and employees must follow bureaucratic principles. Both the employees and managers should realize that they do not own their position in an organization, and it is responsibility to use their authority and control over resources to benefit stakeholders and not themselves. Managers need to strive to make human resource decisions such as hiring, promotion, rewarding employees as fair and equitable as possible. They need to let personalities or relationships to influence their decisions, and employees should complain to managers when they feel their decisions are inappropriate. Periodically, the members of the work group or function should meet to ensure that reporting relationships are clear and ambiguous, and the rules of the members are using to make decisions meet the current needs. Organizations work to uncover the taken for granted assumptions and belief on which it is operating. For example, to make sure they are not wasting their organizational resources by performing unnecessary actions. They should always ask questions such as: is the rule or standard operating procedures really necessary? And who will read the report that I am writing? An MBO, that is management by objective, can also help managers evaluate the working of their hierarchies. What is this MBO? That is management by objective. That is an alternative way to do things to provide a framework within which to evaluate subordinates' behavior, in particular, to allow managers to monitor progress towards achieving their desired objectives. It is a system of evaluating subordinates on their ability to achieve specific organizational goals on performance standards to meet operating budgets. Most organizations make use of MBOs because it is pointless to establish goals and then fail to evaluate whether or not they are being achieved. MBOs involve three specific steps. Like, first is the specific goal and objectives are established at each level of the organization. The second is managers and their subordinates together determine the subordinates' goals. And the third is managers and their subordinates periodically review the subordinates' progress towards those goals. So, we will talk about each one of them in more details. In the first step, specific goals and objectives are established at each level of the organization. So, management by objective starts with the top managers establishing or organizations objectives such as specific financial performance targets. The objective setting cascades down throughout the organization as managers, as in divisional and functional levels, set their objectives to achieve corporate objectives. Finally, the first level managers and workers jointly set objectives that will contribute to achieving functional goals. Second is managers and their subordinates together determine the subordinates' goals. An important characteristics of management by objective is participatory nature. Managers at each level sit down with their subordinates to report directly to them, and together they determine appropriate and feasible goals for subordinates and bargain over the budget that the subordinate will need to achieve these goals. That participation of subordinates in the objective setting process is always to strengthen their commitment to achieve goals and meeting their budgets. Another reason why it is so important for subordinates, both individuals and teams, to participate in goal setting is that they can tell their managers what they think is realistically achievable. The third characteristic is that managers and their subordinates periodically review subordinates' progress towards meeting the goals. Once specific objectives have been agreed on, the managers at each level, the managers are accountable for meeting their objectives. Periodically, they sit together with their subordinates and evaluate their progress. Normally, like salary increase or promotion decisions are linked to the goal setting process, and managers need to achieve their goals, uh, receive greater rewards than those who fall short of it. In short, in the companies that have decentralized responsibilities for production of goods and services to the teams, particularly cross functional teams, management by objective works somewhat differently. Managers ask each team to develop a set of goals and performance targets that the team hopes to achieve, goals consistent with organizational objectives. Managers need to negotiate with each of them, establish its final goals and the budget of the teams that will need to achieve those goals. Then further, it is the reward system that is linked to the team's performance, not the performance of any one team. One company that has spent considerable time developing a formal MBO system is the Zytec Corporation, leading manufacturer of power supplies, of computers, and other electronic equipment. Each of the managers of Zytec and the workers participate in goal setting. The top managers first establish cross functional teams to create a 5-year plan for the company to set board goals for each function. And this plan is then reviewed by employees from all areas of the company. They evaluate their plans' feasibility, make suggestions about how to modify and improve each plan, and each function then uses the broad goals in the plans to set more specific goals for each manager and each team of the organization. The goals are reviewed by the top managers, and the MBO system at that company, Zytec, is wide and full participation is required, and performance is reviewed from both annual and the 5-year terms perspective. So, Zytec MBO system has been very effective. Not all have organizations cost drop dramatically, but the company has won Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award for assessment of quality of products and services. So, here what we are concluding about the learning of bureaucracy, or the arguments for bureaucracy and the counter argument for bureaucracy, we conclude this by presenting two counter arguments about the prevalence of bureaucracy in today's world. First, we describe Benny's argument about the demise of bureaucracy, or we say that bureaucracy is no more required. Then we presented Myweld's counter argument that bureaucracy is still being practiced, or bureaucracy is in good health. And we concluded this discussion by describing how modern corporate bureaucracies have preferred to slim themselves, to reduce the staff strength, to have less number of managerial levels. Next, we explained why bureaucracies are very popular in and still in practice. And finally, we discussed how the organizations can use bureaucracy to benefit themselves, for instance, by using management by objective. Thank you.